Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video on my channel. In this video I would like to talk about objects that you can capture in December this year, so this month. So in astrophotography sometimes it's challenging to find deep scale objects that are suitable or that you can capture right now, and therefore I've decided to do this video. So if you're planning to do a bit of astrophotography this month and you're not sure which objects are visible right now or which objects are suitable for which telescopes, then this video will be very helpful to you. In this video, I'll guide you through different objects that you can capture right now in the night sky. And when talking about these different objects, I'm also planning to talk about the focal length or the telescope or the exposure time that you need to collect in order to capture good images of these deep sky objects. So join me in this video as we explore deep sky objects that you can capture this month with your telescope in the night sky. So first of all, I would like to talk about the nebulae that you can capture right now in the night sky. So for me personally, right now it's the best time of the year to do deep sky astrophotography because there are so many amazing nebulae and galaxies in the night sky to capture. So for example, there is the Orion constellation. And this is already the first constellation I would like to talk about because there are a lot of great nebulae in that constellation that you can capture with your telescope. The first, and in my opinion, best object to capture right now is the Orion Nebula. So the Orion Nebula is an object that you can capture right now in the night sky, and the good thing about this object is that you can use different equipment for capturing this object in the night sky. The Orion Nebula is a relatively big and bright object in the night sky, which means that you can collect good images of this deep sky object even with a shorter exposure time. So for example, I'm planning to use this telescope for photographing the Orion Nebula in just a few weeks, and this telescope has a focal length of only 264 millimeters, but you can even capture this object with a longer focal length. So for example, right now you can see an image I've captured of the Orion Nebula with my bigger telescope, which has a focal length of almost 800 millimeters. And for sure, that really depends on the camera that you're using, but definitely you can capture this object with different focal length, which is why this object is also suitable for beginners. So you can even capture this object in the night sky with a lens, for example. So right now, for example, you can see an image I've captured of the Orion Nebula with my 75 to 300 millimeter lens, and I've used a focal length of 135 millimeters for capturing the image. So it's definitely an object that is also suitable for wide field astrophotography. The next good thing is that it's so bright that you can even achieve good images of this nebula with a very short exposure time. So when there are only a few hours of total clear skies, you can already capture a good image of this object because an exposure time of 1 to 2 hours is already enough for capturing a good image. For sure, as always in astrophotography, a longer exposure time would be better. So if you're planning to capture a very good image, I would recommend to capture at least 8 hours of total exposure time, but a shorter exposure time is also suitable for this object. The next object I'm planning to talk about is the Horsehead and the Flame Nebula. This is an object that is located very close to the Orion Nebula, so they are very close in the night sky. So the Horsehead and Flame Nebula, they are also located in the Orion constellation, which means that these objects are in the same area, which is quite nice. You can even capture a wide field image and include the Horsehead, the Flame Nebula, and the Orion Nebula in just one single image. So I've captured these two objects a few years ago with my bigger telescope, and right now you can see an image I've captured with a focal length of almost 800 millimeters. In this case, the object is a bit more difficult compared to the Orion Nebula, but that's due to the aspect that the Orion Nebula is a very easy object. When planning to capture the Horsehead and the Flame Nebula, I'd recommend to use an astro-modified DSLR camera because there's a lot of H alpha, especially in the Horsehead Nebula. But you can even capture this object with a camera that is not astro-modified, but then your exposure time needs to be a bit longer. But generally speaking, it's still an object that is suitable for beginners as well. So when planning to capture this object, I recommend to capture at least 4 hours. For sure, as always, a long exposure time is better, but this object is a bit darker compared to the Orion Nebula, so I'd recommend to capture a longer exposure time compared to the Orion Nebula. But still, you can already achieve good images with a relatively short overall exposure time. For photographing these two objects, you can use the exact same focal length as for the Orion Nebula, so even with a wide field telescope you can capture great images of these two objects. The next object that you can capture right now in the night sky is an object that is located quite close to the Orion constellation, but it's a very easy object, and it's the Pleiades star cluster. The Pleiades star cluster is right now very high in the night sky, which means it's a great object to capture right now because it's very high in the night sky, which means the conditions are better for astrophotography. The Pleiades star cluster is a very big and bright star cluster in the night sky, so it can even capture amazing images with an exposure time of just 1 hour. It's very easy to capture this object because you can even see it with your eyes in the night sky, which means just in a single light frame, you can already see a few structures in this star cluster, which makes it especially interesting for beginners. As usually, a long exposure time is also recommended. In this case, the focal length is not that important. In this case, you can capture very wide field images of the Pleiades star cluster, but you can also use a longer focal length in order to make more structures visible in this star cluster. The next object I'm planning to talk about is located quite close to the Pleiades star cluster, so as you can see, I'm just focusing on this area because this area is great right now for deep sky astrophotography. The object I'm talking about is the California Nebula. The California Nebula is a great object to capture right now, but it's more challenging compared to the objects I've mentioned before. That's because there's a lot of H alpha in this object, and generally speaking, this object is a bit darker compared to the objects I've mentioned before. So when planning to capture the California Nebula, I definitely recommend to use an astro-modified DSLR camera or a dedicated astrophotography camera like the CWO XI 533 MC Pro. The next object I'm planning to talk about is a galaxy. The galaxy I'm talking about is M31, which is the Andromeda Galaxy. This is one of the best objects for a beginner to capture right now because it's very high in the night sky, so you can capture great images of this galaxy right now, and a very short exposure time is already enough for collecting good data of this object. As always, you can capture this galaxy with different focal lengths, starting from a wide field lens all the way up to big telescopes with a focal length of almost 1000 millimeters. So there are different options for you when planning to capture this deep sky object. The last object I'm planning to talk about is the Triangulum Galaxy, also known as M33. So it's a great galaxy to capture right now because it's quite nice to capture this galaxy because it's also quite high in the night sky, which makes it easier for you to capture clear and sharp images of this object. Right now you can see an image I've captured with a focal length of almost 800 millimeters of this galaxy, and it is definitely a great galaxy even for beginners, but it's a bit more challenging compared to the Andromeda Galaxy. But still you can capture good images of the Triangulum Galaxy with a relatively short exposure time, but I'd recommend to collect an exposure time of at least 4 hours in order to capture good images. So these are the objects I've planned to introduce in this video. If you know other objects to capture right now, feel free to share them down below in the comments. For sure there are even more objects in the Orion constellation, or generally speaking, there are a lot more objects to capture right now, but in this video I've tried to focus on the easiest ones. So this is everything I've planned to mention so far. If you have any further questions about these objects, definitely feel free to ask me down below in the comments, and I'll definitely help you. If you would like to further support me, you can now become a member of my channel. Becoming a member of my channel will really support me, and your support really means a lot to me. If this video was interesting and helpful to you, I would really appreciate a like and a subscription. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, clear skies, Felix.